have that as a metric to say, I got to prevent this customer from leaving. Typically, you can have a customer that loves your product, but they hate the way you distribute it. They hate it. They say it's late, its box is damaged, and they'll call and they'll say, we love your product, but we hate the way you distribute it. So you better figure out how to get this to me better. That's always a challenge because that is good and bad. You're like, oh, I'm glad they love my product. I'm so happy they do. But then when they hate the way they got it.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean,
that's why.
Yeah. Oh, no, please continue. Sorry.
That's why when you asked the question earlier, it's almost short-sighted as manufacturing engineers. And I'm guilty of it when we don't think about the distribution component.
Mm-hmm. I mean, also, what you're saying in terms of like sort of the metrics that allow you to make the argument to get money for a change, both of those are obviously like you have to be able to show that there's pain or there's imminent pain.
Right, imminent pain. And the pain has to be like, yeah, you can't even say like sometimes I've gotten in trouble. Like I'll present something and then my boss will say, or the director will say, those metrics are from last quarter. And you're like, yeah, no. And they're like, you don't have anything from last month? No, I don't. But I know last quarter I suffered. So sometimes they buck you on that. I want recent data. And sometimes if the data's gotten better, you're like, oh God, it's gotten better and I still want this CapEx, right? It's gotten better, but I still really want this improvement. How do I show that I really still need this CapEx?
So how would you do that? So tell me, can you
really
give me an example? Can you give me an example of like, because I think this is what I'm trying to get at is that, I see like, the data is useful, obviously, and they're thinking about their bottom line. But on the other hand, you're seeing like trends. Like you might see you see that tape thing, that that's a problem, or you see these other things, and so you're constrained to make this obviously this like clear. Here's the data, but sometimes there's not the data, but that these things have to change, or the data doesn't quite align like in a case like that doesn't quite align with what you're trying to
it doesn't align right.
So how do you what would be a way that you work around that, especially when this is an improvement that has to happen?
Oh, you just have to show a trend. So typically if you had like a really bad quarter and you might be coming up on a good 2 months, I'm very candid with the management team. I'm like, this is a trend. Here's some additional, I try to figure out if I have any, what we call any intangible factors. So I'll say, hey, it's seasonal, right? Straight up, Janelle, my guys do not work as fast in the winter because it's cold. So my warehouse is not heated. So my picks are different. So, sometimes I have to show these seasonal. I might have to show I had a higher temporary workforce, or maybe a lower temporary workforce at that time. So I try to come up with some different factors when I'm making my presentation to say that, hey, yeah, I might have gotten better this month, but this is not normal, and it's just basic math. I just show like a run chart and I say, hey, this is common cause variation, special cause variation. This is not normal. Here's a 6-month rolling average, and as you can see, it might be getting better by like 1% or 2%, but this is not what I typically observe. So I'll just throw in some of those factors. Maybe do some interviews, bring those people in that do the job. Anything to try and help my case. Anything to try and help my CapEx case. Sometimes when those capital expenditures are like over $1 million, you're going all the way up to the VP. And at that point, it gets a lot more trickier, right? Because at that point, they really just want to do math. So you just have to be a little bit tighter on your presentation. But it depends on the level of the CapEx. Each company is different. Each company has different rules, and they have different ROI rules. So like when I used to work in my old company, if the return was like within a year, I had the power to do it myself. Like one level could do it. But if it was like 5 years, you had to take it all the way up to like the president, right? Because that was when it was a lot of money and you might not get the payoff until a couple of more years.
Mhm. Um, can you give me an example of, and you don't have to go into too many specifics, but
Hmm.
can you describe sort of an improvement, capex that required capex that you're really proud of, that you were able to convince them and you got it and you were able to show, look, we've been able to actually make the improvement. Like, yeah, can you give any examples of anything that you feel
Of a
improvement you
capex
feel good
that
about?
worked.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
Or just
God!
a
Wait a
capex
minute.
that worked.
Oh no, Janelle, I don't know. We might have to end
Oh
this call
no,
now. Okay, so
no.
sometimes they fail. Oh God, let me find.
No, but that's
Let me.
no, because we're not. I mean, as you know, this is not evaluative research, so you
Yeah,
do not
yeah,
need to worry about that. We're really
yeah.
interested in what's because, like I said, we're interested in opportunities and obstacles.
Oh
So
yeah.
don't worry about it. So if you don't have a good
So
positive, you can tell me one that you were sure was going to work and didn't. So that's fine too. Yeah.
yeah, I had a new a capex on a manufacturing line. My team my team designed it and wanted it, and we bought the piece of equipment. But when we put it in and installed it, the team didn't feel comfortable with it.
Mm.
So although they were engaged in the initial design and yay, let's do this, it seemed as though we failed in in using it. And so what happened is the old piece of equipment was still around. So sometimes they would just take the brand new piece of equipment off and put the old equipment on because they were comfortable with that. So that I didn't get the return that I thought I was going to get. I did see an incremental improvement, but not what I wanted to see. So my lesson learned was when you're dealing with people and they have a comfort level with a piece of equipment and it fails, they know how to repair that failure. But if you have a new piece of equipment and it fails, they don't know how to repair that, and so they get nervous. And when they get nervous, they want to go back to the old way. So even though the old piece of equipment it failed more, they felt like, oh, I know how to repair that. I know how to debug that. So I'm just going to go back to the old piece of equipment because even though it fails more, when it fails, I know what to do. And you're like, yeah, but the new piece of equipment doesn't fail. Yeah, but when it did, I didn't know what to do.
It's the whole human. It's the whole human element.
It's a human element. So you have to really be careful for that interaction with the new piece of equipment and the human element. It's almost like, here's a good example. If you go in manufacturing right now, what you'll see a brand new thing, a new technology is these vending machines. So you swipe your card, say you were Janelle, and you go up and I say, Janelle, you're like, I need a wrench to do this job. So we used to keep the wrenches on the floor, but they would walk away. You'd be like, I bought 5 wrenches on Monday. It's Friday. Where the heck are the wrenches? So we were losing tools. So I think one of the big companies, say it was Granger, somebody MasterCard came up with these vending machines, just like snack vending machines, where Janelle would go up and you walk up to the vending machine and you say, I need wrench to do my job for the day. So you would badge in, it would drop the wrench like a bag of chips. You would get the wrench and you would use it. And then at the end of the day, you would have to turn that wrench back in. So you see these tool machines all over plants now, and we got one. The problem with that is you assume that the person doing the job really knows the equipment that is needed. So what we failed at doing was being very, very specific to say, you don't just go get this wrench. You have to get this specific wrench for this specific job. So we had to make sure our training materials and our SOPs were specific. So we got ourselves in trouble because when you used to have a person that used to be there issuing out the wrench, that person knew who you were and they knew what job you were doing. So it wasn't a matter of, is this the right tool for my job? Because you had this human person there saying, oh, you're doing this, you really need this wrench, versus a machine. So we got a little bit in trouble with rolling that out as well. Now it's okay. We had to make sure our documents were right, make sure they were clean, make sure it was visible, everybody knew what they were doing. We had to make sure that the tooling machines were in the right location so we could minimize walking, because that was another thing. They would just get lost, and I'm using air quotes, right? 20, 30 minutes walking around the plant. And then you come back to your workplace, use this wrench, do this job for X number of hours, return that wrench, go get the next wrench, bring it back, and do the, next couple of jobs. So you just have to make sure that this whole you get all this new technology, but if you're going to take out the human, what are you really taking out? What else are you missing that you've got to figure out how to replace that, or if it's okay for that to still be missing? I don't know if that's kind of rambling, but
that's
in
great.
manufacturing, you see that. Yeah, you see that often.
Yeah. No, that's I think
so,
this is something that we're hearing. We hear a lot about is that it's not the technology. It's figuring out how the technology is going to work with people. And if you're removing a role, with technology, what are you replacing it with? What kind? Keep going, please.
So good. So other manufacturing engineers are saying the same exact thing I'm saying. So, and I believe that's because we've all had to deal with people. And so a good example is, I was on a very manual line. I was an engineer on a line that was completely manual, making an aircraft, versus another line that had a lot more automation and robotics. My meetings with the manufacturing engineers on the lines that were automated and robotic were totally different than my meetings, because I had a lot more people. So I was talking about aged equipment. But it worked. But I was talking about the interface with aged equipment, the interface with part movement, and my colleagues on the robotic line didn't have to worry too much about that. Whereas my challenges were a lot more with that human interaction compared to them. They were more about how they're maintaining their equipment, how what is their maintenance schedule. Mine was, do I really have the right synchronization of breaks with fatigue and usage of equipment? So it's totally different feel depending on what manufacturer, how are you making that product? Especially also though, Janelle, a key component, and I don't know if other interviewees have talked about this, is if they have proprietary stuff. So sometimes when you have proprietary, I worked in food manufacturing, so I had a couple of recipes that were proprietary. That also has a different set of challenges because you have to have different pieces of equipment. And sometimes you have dedicated equipment. So you cannot use those pieces of equipment with any other customer. So you might have advancements with some customers, but not advancements with other customers. Does that make sense? So you might have a line for one customer that's like completely robotic, completely automated. And then the other customer is like, I don't want any of that. I don't want you to make it on any kind of other different equipment or anything like that, because we're concerned about, the same exact taste. And if we get that taste from this piece of equipment, that's all we're concerned about. So some of that proprietariness I know in food manufacturing is important.
What would you say is your superpower when it comes to what you do?
Well, I'm a trained industrial engineer, so really the whole thing that I'm supposed to be doing is trying to eliminate waste out of the process, make it better, make the actual process better. So that's really what my training is, and that's my passion. So I should be able to observe a process very quickly and figure out what's going wrong and what's not going wrong, and either do better with that. Whatever's going right, how do I get better in that? How do I make that faster? How do I make that safer? If we got problems that are going wrong, we got to figure out how to get rid of it quickly. Quantifying it and figuring out how to get rid of it quickly. Especially if it's costing our company money. Especially if it's costing money, right?
So I'll rephrase this a little bit. What do you think, just given your experiences, what do you think, is within industrial engineering, or it could be just kind of what's your special sauce, or what is the thing that you bring that, or people know you for, even like, let's say people who are other industrial engineers, what do they say, oh, what's your kind of like, what's your ace in the hole?
Probably just the relationship with the guys on the floor. So the guys on the floor quickly trust me, and they trust that I'm there to make an improvement, not necessarily to fire them. So industrial engineers that have if you think about this, Janelle, you're going into a process to try and make it better, faster, cheaper. The guys on the floor know that might mean robotics or automation, which means that might be a job elimination, right? So they get nervous when they see us coming on the floor. And so my job is one of the good things that I'm good at is building that trust and confidence with them so that they are open and to share with me how they believe it's best to improve the process. So I'm really good with gaining that trust and facilitating those kind of group meetings and bringing the industrial engineering principles a little bit to a lower level, not take it very technical, but keep it very easy for everybody to understand. And I believe that's probably my niche. Just really gaining that trust and making industrial engineering principles very, very easy for the common person to understand.
Can you give an example of like how would you break down something, like what would it sound like even if you were talking to another industrial engineer versus what it would sound like when you're talking to someone on the floor? So any kind of principle or even a recent experience where you're like, they might not even know, the guy on the floor might not even know you're talking about an industrial engineering principle, but you're making it, make sense to them. So any example of what that would sound like?
Yeah, so and typically we want our guys to understand what is not value added. And so when you're talking to another engineer, you would say non-value added, value added. Well, that's using the word value to any normal person sounds like, oh, you're not valuing me? You don't think I'm good enough, right? Anybody would say that, like, why do you think I'm not good enough? And so what I would say is, oh, hey, guys, we want to know within your job, what do you do that makes the company money? And when you say it like that, they'll tell you what in their process is value added without actually saying value added. And then I say, so what do you think is not making the company money? And they might say, well, when we talk about waiting around, having to look for stuff, having to transport stuff, having quality defects, then they'll say that's not value added. But they never put two and two together. They'll say, yeah, that's not making the company money if the product comes back bad, because we have to issue a credit. And I say that having say non-value added. So the typical engineering term is value added versus non-value added or waste. And so when you use words like, are you making money? Is the company making money? They seem to put it in a different lens. Or I might just say, especially if we know that people are getting bonuses and stuff like that, say, hey, do we all know how our bonuses are structured? Yes or no? Okay, well, we had this kind of quality issue and that impacted our bonus this year. What do you think we're doing wrong? How do you think that we got to get better quality? And then the floodgates just start coming open.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just really relating